I'm going to start talking about the digital marketing tactics. Now, again, I apologize for any of those long-term clients of ours or previous workshop attendees. I've introduced these basic concepts multiple times, so you're probably used to hearing it. But it is actually really critical to understand how we at least approach marketing in general. There's this school of thought that basically says that all the marketing that you could be doing right now will fall into either one of two categories. And again, this isn't our idea, it's just an idea that's been around a while, that you're either doing something to create rain, like rain-making strategy, or you're doing something to capture demand, which is rain catching. So an example of this would be like, let's take a home improvement category like kitchen cabinets. You could, and probably have, if you're in that category, done proactive advertising to push that idea out there and say, hey, when's the last time you updated your cabinets? And you should hear this message. You could try TV, radio, billboards, all those traditional sort of marketing methods that are really designed to put an idea out there, to put an offer or whatever, with the hopes that someone will hear that and then take some form of action. You're hoping to persuade or encourage them to call you, to fill out a form or whatever. That's fine. Those are the rain-making tactics. At the same time, however, the other tactics that are available to you are ways to capture demand from people that are much further along on their decision-making cycle. If you, for instance, there's already people out there looking for kitchen cabinet upgrades or whatever the category is, it makes sense, obviously, to make sure that you're getting your share of those as well. Not that you shouldn't be creating demand, but you should clearly be doing everything you can to capture that low-hanging fruit. Now, that idea has existed for a long time, and it actually layers quite nicely into the world of digital marketing. With digital, you can think of all the tactics that you've heard or seen before, and they all kind of do fit into one or the other, or in some cases, both of those sort of areas of marketing. Facebook and some of the social media platforms are an awesome way to create awareness, to create demand. Facebook, as a good example, allows you to very specifically pick a target group, target market, and push a message right into their everyday feed. It's the classic, interruption marketing. On the other hand, things like Google, if you're a local business or a service or selling a product, Amazon, YouTube, even LinkedIn, some of these strategies allow you to capture what's actually going on in the market. So even whatever category you're in, there's probably going to be some combination of these things that under normal circumstances would be the right formula. You might do some of this, some of that. It's, there's probably things that are going to work on each side. Now, as we start to talk about what is usually the highest priority is the demand capture, it kind of starts with a basic understanding of Google and the Google algorithm. And again, I will say this a couple more times. I apologize for recovering areas that you might have already heard about. Google is basically the beginning when it comes to demand capture. It's about 85% of search. Almost everyone, now more than ever, is using that as a way to figure out who they're going to do business with, what products they're going to buy, so forth and so on. A basic understanding of how this works is sort of important to know, to really kind of devise your strategy and to get an idea of what kind of searches you should be showing up on and so forth and so on. So normally there's about 5.6 billion searches every single day. And obviously that has actually increased now. So that number is probably much, much higher, maybe by 20 or even 30%. Every single one of those searches though, the way Google sort of categorizes searches and makes its own sort of interpretation of your intent can be classified into just one of three types of searches. Number one is what's considered a navigational search. A navigational search is any search that you do that is basically it's you trying to figure out how to get to wherever you're trying to get on the internet. If you're looking for a business, obviously, a book, a movie, something that you already know about, but you're just trying to find your way there. That's a navigational search. Now, very important right now is for a business, a navigational search, when someone searches on your brand, should show up like this. It should be your URL and everything up here, and then what's basically called your Google Knowledge Panel off to the side. This is the area where people are going to see the basics about your business, your hours, your current situation, and we're going to come back to like how to update all this information, but that's a very important thing to be really attentive to right now if you have not already. So there's that. The second type of search that represents those massive amount of searches going on every day are what are considered informational. Google can tell the difference between somebody who's already knows what they're looking for and navigating their way there versus somebody who's just trying to learn about something. Informational searches, when Google picks up that that's what you're doing, will look like this. Usually some form of an info panel followed by these other questions that people have already asked. It's possible, depending on the content of your website and the things that you're talking about, that you may be seeing an increase in informational searches. If people are wondering, for instance, about cleaning tactics, and you happen to have a house cleaning site that has really good content on it, you could be seeing an uptick in the results that you're getting on that kind of search. For most businesses, though, that's not necessarily the big, the holy grail or the end game when it comes to trying to get more visibility. What you're typically after is the third kind of search. The third kind of search is what's considered transactional. This is when Google picks up on the idea that this person already kind of knows what they're after. They don't know exactly where to go, but they're trying to make a decision that's, for lack of a better word, transactional. They're either trying to buy a product or they're trying to locate a local service provider, business, or whatever, or something on a national scale. So it's very important that you kind of have that fundamental understanding of those three types and really kind of think about what it is that you're after. If you are in a situation where you have some product or some service or anything that your potential clients might be looking for right now, what you're after on that front is visibility that looks kind of like this. So in Google, if it detects that your search is transactional, and let's say that it's on a local level, I apologize to the e-commerce people for just a moment, but let's say that you're in a market, whatever city you're in, and you're trying to make sure that people find you on that level. Google kind of gives you these three things. It gives you the ability to show up in the free area right here. It gives you the ability to buy your way to the top of search through Google paid ads. And it also gives you what are called local service ads. And we're going to just quickly discuss each one of these. Now, for most businesses, local visibility and getting more people to find you on just these local search formats is generally what you're after. That's generally, again, I'm using huge generalities here, but for most, that's going to account for most of what you would consider your high quality visitation. So the way Google's changed things, and I'm not talking about just over the last couple of weeks, but just over the last few years, when it does pick up on the idea that it's a local business or a local service or something in their region, it's almost always going to display results in the form of what we call the 3-pack. The 3-pack are the 3 organic listings that come up right here. There's also the ability to buy an ad that kind of like rises to the top of those. It's been so prevalent now, and it's been so widely used that Google, in a lot of cases, is not even really showing anything of much interest even below the 3-pack. Like this is just an example of a search on dentists. All the dentists and all the information you need appears in this upper section. What happens down here is Yelp, Open Care, Health Rates. That's not even what you were looking for. So what it really means is that the battle for visibility is kind of being won or lost depending on how you show up in this area here. So the fundamentals of what you need to do in this area have always been and are even now more so really critical to having a grasp on. It all starts with what's called your Google My Business listing, and the general best practices is obviously you need to have ownership of your Google My Business listing. That's a claim and verify process. You want to make sure your name formatting is correct, but there's a side note on that, it's temporary. Your address, you need to have a physical address in order to verify that it's you, but you do not have to list the address for the entire world to see. Obviously, we recommend having a permanent phone number on there and not using a phone number that basically swaps all the time because of some marketing tracking number. You need to have your URL on there, but ideally it needs to be what we call your final destination URL. If you have a lot of redirects, like if you've got a URL that then eventually bounces off to something else, that end spot, that final destination, needs to be the one that you put on this particular listing if you're following best practices. And then there's also the selection of your category. Now, once you have that, and this is where there's a lot of things that you can and should be doing in this platform in normal times, but now probably even more so than ever. You get access to this panel, and within it, you have the ability to see a lot of very important information like insights and how you're showing up and how often people are hitting the click to call button. It's where you can set and change hours of business. It's where you can add what are called posts that will give people updates on whatever is going on within your organization or company. And we'll start with that. Google Posts. This is basically a free area where you can post information. You can post things on your announcements, events, products, business information, offers, whatever you want the public or your current clients or potential clients to see. That's an area to do that. You can also use it to schedule events and show things that you have coming up. Now, clearly, gatherings aren't going to be a big deal, but like in our case, our webinar was posted on this as an event that we had coming up. So those are very important things to attend to. Now, normally, under normal circumstances, there's other things that you can and should be doing. There's an FAQ section that allows you to answer people's questions. There are a lot of other areas where you can add content and actually be very interactive with your clients. And we'll get to that in just a moment. For now, it still makes sense to add as much information as you possibly can. You want to tell people things like your attributes, like veteran-owned, women-led, all those things are really important. There's also a multiple number of messaging options that you want to at least explore. Again, there's no one size fits all, and depending on how your website's set up and some other technologies, you want to open up every possible scenario where people can actually reach out to you and you're able to know that they're reaching out to you and you can respond. It's also, under normal circumstances, sort of a ground zero or home base for reviews. Reviews, obviously, we do entire workshops just on the topic of reviews. They're absolutely critical to businesses, and they are, and the most important platform by far is the Google My Business listing. So that's a perfect segue into some of the changes that are going on right now. So Google has basically come out and said that because a lot of their employees are working remotely, they're not going to be as quick to be able to deal with some of the issues that come up unless you're in one of the main categories, health-related, things like whether or not you're open or closed. If you're changing, those are basically getting the priority. Other changes like getting a brand new listing for a business that didn't have one before, that might take a little longer. If you basically get penalized for something and you're disputing it, getting through that process is probably going to take a little longer. The things that they've really changed that are pretty dramatic, I mean, the things that we're so used to doing are, number one, reviews. As of right now, they're not publishing any new reviews, which is like, wow, that's kind of a big deal. They're also not, they've actually disabled for the time being the entire Q&A section, and they're not pushing through review replies. The general thought is they don't want anybody to just basically take a negative hit out of this. If there was a trend, really quickly growing trend, and Yelp did some stuff about this too, as we're going to talk about, where people were putting out misinformation, like reviewing a restaurant and saying, well, this place didn't look too clean, and I'm pretty sure the waiter had whatever. You cannot, they're not allowing any of that. So they've kind of just suspended the system for the time being. You're probably asking, what if someone gives me a review? Based on everything that we've ever seen about the Google review system, those will probably, and I can't guarantee it 100%, but probably just sort of stack up. They will eventually go live. So there's no reason to stop requesting reviews. There's no reason to suspend any of that activity. What'll most likely happen is that after this next several weeks or whatever go by, those reviews will start to show up once Google kind of works its way through that backlog. Same with responding. If you did get a negative review and you're trying to report it, or you're trying to respond to it, don't panic if your response doesn't show up right away. It will probably eventually show up. And I hate to be even a little bit hesitant on that, but things are changing very rapidly. We could come back next week and say, okay, remember that whole review thing I talked about? Here's another change. But at least as of right now, the general understanding is that those will eventually show up.